Does pure altruism exist? You might be surprised by the answer. Is there such a thing as pure altruism? In other words, are there truly selfless good deeds? Let's talk about it in this video. You know, Joey and Phoebe talked about it.
Look, there's no unselfish good deeds, sorry.
Yes, there are. There are totally good deeds that are selfless.
May I ask for one example?
No, you may not.
Okay, so Phoebe didn't want to give an example right there, but we will try to find some good examples in this video. And more than that, our discussion will go beyond just behaviors or just good deeds, because to determine if a seemingly selfless behavior is truly altruistic, we must also talk about the psychological motives that underlie such a behavior in order to see if that behavior is selfish or genuinely and purely altruistic. Let me use my usual list format and list out 7 things I wish to discuss. First, definition. What is altruism? And by implication, what isn't altruism? Altruistic behavior is behavior that is intended to directly or indirectly benefit others and not the self, and at a cost to the self. As such, pure altruism must fulfill all 3 elements of this definition: benefiting others, not benefiting the self, and at a cost to the self. This is a pretty high threshold to cross. Let's consider some examples. Let's say you dropped your pen on the floor and I picked it up for you. Is this an altruistic behavior? I can imagine that most people would say that this doesn't sound like an altruistic behavior because it simply does not fulfill the definition cited above. Sure, by picking up your pen for you, I helped you, and this behavior benefited you. However, there is no cost for me doing it. In other words, I did not have to give up anything important, valuable, or substantial to me. So, no cost to me. Consequently, altruistic behavior must be distinguished from helping behavior, the distinction being this element of self-sacrifice. This self-sacrificial element, or being at cost, or giving up something important, valuable to the self, is very much at the core of altruism. Altruistic behavior is always helping others, but helping others may not always be altruistic. Just because I helped somebody out does not mean I was being altruistic. I was just being helpful. Let's consider another example. Say this time I help a friend in need at a cost to myself. It sure is helping behavior, but this time there is also substantial cost to the self involved. Does this automatically make it purely altruistic? Well, not necessarily. And this is because in this example, the seemingly selfless helping behavior is predicated upon loyalty or friendship or a particular type of social relationship. Pure altruism should not be predicated upon such relationships or a sense of in-group identity. For behaviors to be truly selfless or purely altruistic, group identity or loyalty or friendship or patriotism should not play a part. Social psychological and experimental research has shown that people are more likely to help those others who are considered as in-group members. Americans are more likely to help other Americans, and Chinese are more willing to help Chinese. As such, group identity or a sense of patriotic duty or other forms of social relationships on which helping behaviors can be predicated can actually be separated out or distinguished from pure altruism. Consequently, we should differentiate between altruism on the one hand and loyalty or friendship or group membership or patriotism on the other. Let's talk about intrinsic rewards. If one were to engage in seemingly very altruistic behaviors to benefit others at great cost to the self, like donating money or donating blood or donating organs, but one does so because of religious teachings, because by doing so they can feel at peace, because by doing so they can experience a sense of accomplishment or satisfaction, then are those behaviors purely altruistic? Many would argue no. This is simply because if the reason for people to engage in such behavior is to seek intrinsic rewards and satisfaction, then it is benefiting the self. And again, psychological research has shown that intrinsic motivation is a very strong and powerful form of motivation, and in many cases, stronger than extrinsic motivation. And when it is those personal gratifications or those intrinsic motives that drive people to engage in altruistic behaviors, well, they make those behaviors not entirely or purely altruistic. We should also talk about the issue of altruistic behaviors in animals and the evolutionary and ethological perspectives of altruism. It has been observed in nature that sometimes an animal would make the ultimate sacrifice to benefit others. When faced with predators, one individual animal may sacrifice its own life so that the rest of the pack or clan or herd can escape. Thus, the motive for such altruistic behavior, although clearly not to benefit the self, is to benefit the offspring or the kinship or the species overall. As such, researchers tend to interpret such behaviors from an evolutionary biological perspective, that animals are conditioned to engage in behaviors that can pass along their genes and to ensure the survival of their offspring and the species overall. And given this strong intrinsic motive, an animal howling to catch the attention of the predator so that its offspring can escape, although feels highly altruistic to us, is really just a matter of survival. Survival of the offspring and survival of the species. People have also observed cross-species altruistic behavior. For instance, people have observed dogs who just gave birth to puppies but had the puppies taken away, mothering kittens. In such cases, it is not that those dogs are so altruistic that they want to benefit another species. Rather, it is more likely that those dogs do so because mothering those kittens fulfills the dog's need and instinct to care for their own newborns. And as such, those behaviors are not purely altruistic. There is a benefit to the self. Here's another argument for why there isn't such a thing as pure altruism. According to neuropsychologists and neurobiologists who used fMRI to scan volunteers' brains, they observed that the engagement in altruistic thinking triggered certain parts of the brain, particularly circuits in the subgenual cortex or the septal region. They concluded that the findings of their experiment suggest that altruism is not a superior moral faculty that suppresses basic selfish urges, but rather it is basic to the human brain. It is hardwired and it is pleasurable, and that's why we engage in it. Now let's look at a final argument for why pure altruism is impossible, why humans are simply psychologically incapable of pure altruism, and why that actually is a good thing. Look, in the earlier part of my presentation, I mentioned how altruistic behaviors tend to provide us with intrinsic rewards or a sense of personal gratification or a sense of accomplishment from doing good, or a sense of peace because we know we helped somebody in need. We've also learned from neurological studies that even the engagement in altruistic thinking can be pleasurable because it triggers certain parts of the brain. As such, we can pretty much conclude that every time we're about to do something altruistic, or every time we decide to do something altruistic, we know that we're going to feel pretty good afterwards, that we know we're going to have this intrinsic reward, this sense of satisfaction. And this rules out the possibility for us to ever fulfill the definition that purely altruistic behavior must not at all benefit the self. Because chances are the self will always be benefited by this strong intrinsic reward and intrinsic satisfaction, and this means that pure psychological altruism is just simply not possible to attain. But is this realization bad? Is it a bad thing to realize that we're incapable of pure psychological altruism? No, this is a good thing. This is probably the greatest thing to realize, that to benefit others, we're also benefiting ourselves. That to give is truly to receive as well. Okay, so this is a good point for me to wrap up this video, but there is more to cover about altruism, so in the next video I'll talk about whether or not the definition of altruism should be modified. We'll look at how some scholars have indeed suggested that this definition should be tweaked. We will also discuss why this topic is important and what is the practical value of trying to figure out what is genuinely altruistic and what isn't. I will also lay out some arguments in support of the view that pure altruism does exist. So please stay tuned for my next video on the topic of pure altruism. Thanks for watching this Rainy-Based Random video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Maybe Joey's right. Maybe all good deeds are selfish. I will find a selfless good deed, because I just gave birth to 3 children, and I will not let them be raised in a world where Joey is right.